Video game fans are, in general, a pretty loyal bunch. We voluntarily engage in a hobby that is, well, let's face it, pretty darn expensive. We keep video game franchises alive for decades on end, and we follow our favorite video game creators as they go from developer to publisher. That is probably why we get grumpier than the average media consumer when we feel wronged. There are a variety of ways game developers and publishers can lose favor with their fan base, but a few surefire examples include wild reimaginings of franchise narratives and gameplay mechanics, a willful ignorance of fan wishes, all of that old chestnut, insidious microtransactions. The entries on this list contain a selection of the above and then some, but what ties them all together is taking a group of fans who were very much on board and delivering them one defining moment where the majority of them noped out. Some never to return. I'm Jess from WhatCulture, and here are exact moments video game fans tapped out. Number 10. Not the Metal Gear game we were looking for. Metal Gear Survive. For video game fans to really tap out, we should talk about a franchise that's wildly beloved, and they don't get much bigger in that category than Metal Gear. Well, that is until Metal Gear Survive. While 2015's Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain had elements and story beats that weren't everybody's cup of tea, not to mention its lack of finish due to the relationship breakdown between creator Hideo Kojima and Konami, fans didn't understand how good they had it until the arrival of Metal Gear Survive. While loyal followers of the series tried to be optimistic, nothing was right about 2018's Metal Gear Survive. The game felt like a generic zombie survival actioner with some mild Metal Gear flavor that lost all of what made its parent franchise special. The game was critically panned as a repetitive, frustrating, and microtransaction-riddled cash grab. Not to mention, fans had already mostly tapped out when news broke that Kojima would not be involved with Metal Gear Survive, but the few who did decide to stick around were pretty much done after the first few minutes of this game. Number 9. $75 for skins. Marvel's Avengers. It's fair to say that fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe put up with a lot, and generally they're a forgiving bunch. That goes doubly for fans of Square Enix's Marvel's Avengers video game, which has already gone through the ringer for its broken matchmaking, uninspired endgame, and repetitive mechanics. All that said, there was a dedicated bunch who stuck with it anyway, insisting the game was a diamond in the rough and absolutely not that bad. Then they went and tried to get those people to spend $75 on skins, and that patience wore out. Keep in mind, these are the people who defended the game through all its early microtransactions, including its XP boost that could only be purchased with real-world money. A boost that was implemented after Crystal Dynamics altered the progression system to make it slower to level up, which is pretty darn shady. Though this boost was dropped after only a month due to fan backlash, the same consumer-unfriendly tactics were pulled just a couple of months ago when the MCU outfit pack dropped, and it was revealed the 10 outfits would run players $75. In some regions, that's even more than the game itself costs. I feel like I probably don't need to explain why a bunch of people just shrugged their shoulders and walked off at that point. Number 8. No NPCs in this post-apocalypse. Fallout 76. Potentially controversial opinion here, but I'd argue that Fallout didn't necessarily lose its player base when it was announced the game would focus on multiplayer. Was the focus on multiplayer what die-hard single-player fans of the classic Fallout games were keen for? Not necessarily. But even for super multiplayer-averse gamers like me, there was a curiosity about what it would be like to share one of Bethesda's big open worlds with your friends. Instead, the bigger fumble for dedicated Fallout buffs was probably the announcement that the game would have no NPCs. After all, there are plenty of MMOs and multiplayer games that manage to have engaging stories, and engaging stories are what the Fallout series is built on. But it's tricky to do that when your only non-playable characters are robots. While some did enjoy the eerie, empty post-apocalypse, the soul of Fallout games is so often delivered through the NPCs, your relationships with them, and their troubling stories, that something very important was lost when they were omitted. Of course, NPCs are now back in Fallout 76, and they're unlikely to leave ever again, but the decision to nix them from the outset certainly alienated a lot of fans. Number 7. Do you guys not have phones? Diablo Immortal. There are a few things guaranteed to go down like a lead balloon when it comes to a highly anticipated announcement, and those things can be summed up into 3 phrases: free-to-play, mobile game, and microtransactions. And what do you know, when a bunch of hopeful BlizzCon 2018 attendees bent their ear hoping for news of Diablo 4, what they got instead was the announcement of Diablo Immortal, and with it, the trifecta of all those things. You have to feel a little bad for game director Wyatt Chang, as by all accounts, Diablo Immortal is a fully fledged Diablo experience. It just happens to be on mobiles where nobody really wanted it to be, especially when a PC and console-based Diablo game hadn't been released for 6 years at this point. What gamers in the room and around the world got was a mobile game ad when their expectations had been way up. While the game has now come to PC with some rampant microtransactions, at the time there were no plans to bring it to any platform other than mobile, at which point Chang responded to booing with the infamous phrase, "Do you guys not have phones?" It's easy to point to the release of Diablo 4 now and see that fans are clearly tapping back in, but boy was it a dark 5 years in the middle there. Number 6. Dante, DMC Devil May Cry. Character redesigns aren't always a bad thing, but plenty of DMC fans were left with a bad taste in their mouth after spending time with the new and not so improved Dante of DMC Devil May Cry. With a new look and a new attitude designed to appeal to a younger generation, this Dante got plenty of fans offside before the game even came out. Although combat proved to be just as satisfying as ever, and there were a few people who were a fan of the redesign, most people decided it was just not for them. Plenty of players felt the redesign instructed by Capcom left Dante seeming like he was trying way too hard to be cool and serious, and ultimately, it all fell flat. Given that DMC is an origin story, there is some amount of leeway in what they could get away with as far as the redesign, but it left most fans feeling like they lost their favorite gothic and sarcastic protagonist in place of a wannabe facsimile. If DMC wasn't a Devil May Cry game, this might not have gathered so much ire, but it was, so Dante was born. Number 5. It was all a dream. 12 minutes. Spoiler warning here, as we will need to talk about the full plot of 2021's 12 Minutes in order to dig into just how bad this one screwed over fans who stuck with it to the end. If you don't want to know what happens, come meet us at number 4, but to be honest, this game probably isn't worth playing. There are 2 major moments where fans who are truly dedicated to the time loop puzzle game would have tapped out, and it's really tough to pick a favorite. Well, we obviously mean a least favorite. I mean, one of these things is incest, and the other one is it all being a dream, so some real doozies. While 12 Minutes' heavy narrative focus and time loop mechanic weren't for everyone, it was exactly what certain players were looking for. And so a collection of fans were enraptured, trying to sort out the puzzle elements of the singular apartment location, discover more pieces of the mystery, and ultimately unravel the narrative. What a disappointment then when it turns out that, among other reveals, you and your wife are half siblings about to have a baby. Ew. While one ending lets you just continue on happily with your incest life, the other one has you basically understanding that you've just been under hypnosis the entire time, and so none of what you've just played out has actually happened. I'll let you decide which is worse. Number 4. No autosaving. Returnal. This one divided those who did and did not tap out based on their non-gaming life commitments. Those who were able to dedicate chunks of time to gaming didn't see it as a problem at all, and those who scrape out precious morsels of video game breaks in their day were so broken down by it that they had to give up on Returnal whether they wanted to or not. The drama was at launch that runs of 2021's Returnal had to be completed all in one go, otherwise you'd have to abandon it and lose your progress. Okay, so you could technically pause it, but if you turned off the game or suffered a power outage, you'd lose progress. This being a pretty brutal punishment in a game that's already very far from easy. In some cases, your runs could take up to an hour of precision shooting and platforming, so losing any ground to something that wasn't your fault felt like a loss you couldn't or didn't want to recover from. The game does now let you suspend your progress and safely turn off the console if you want or need to, but a lot of fans did tap out before that implementation. Number 3. Built on microtransactions, Star Wars Battlefront 2. With every consumer-unfriendly business practice and ludicrously priced or positioned microtransaction scheme, publishers run the risk of burning a bridge between them and their players. While a lot of these real-world money mechanics and practices slide on by as just a little insidious, EA kicked off the mother of all video game controversies when they tried to wring fans dry with Star Wars Battlefront 2's microtransactions. In essence, EA was all set to charge you for skins to weapon upgrades and pretty much everything in between, thus breaking the game down to those who wanted to pay to win and those who didn't. EA were forced to pull way back on their microtransaction plans in order to salvage a tiny amount of goodwill from their previously keen fanbase. But by that point, they'd stirred up enough ire that plenty of fans decided to move on from the game entirely before it even properly launched. Number 2. Princess Beach, Death Stranding. There's a certain amount of twisty-turny yet inarguably compelling melodrama that you're signing up for when you agree to let Hideo Kojima take you down the rabbit hole of one of his video game narratives. Death Stranding is certainly up there with one of Kojima's more divisive and strange stories, and even as a Death Stranding apologist myself, the most accepting and understanding of gamers did hit a point with this story where we just had to say, well, that's all getting a bit silly. Toward the pointy end of the already wildly convoluted narrative, peppered with characters that have names like Fragile and Die Hard Man, you find yourself on the foreshadowed beach that links the living and the dead. All of this is fine, except when you're speaking to your sister Amelie about linking herself to the chiral network. And Sam is for some reason compelled to say, "So I'm Mario and you're Princess Peach." As if that wasn't cringy enough, she suggests you run home across the beach together, and I quote, "like Mario and Princess Beach." Because they're on a beach. Get it? Yeah, they also run in slow motion. It is a moment that's very hard to get on board with, no matter how much of the story you've happily swallowed so far. Number 1, a live service looter shooter. Again, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. A rocksteady superhero game is more than enough to get ears perked up and keen to find out what lies in store, especially after the awesome legacy of the Batman Arkham games. Imagine the disappointing blow then of fans of the not yet released Suicide Squad game they're making when we finally got gameplay and it looks like it's just another looter shooter. Dreams of nuanced relationships between the Suicide Squad members and complex combat, traversal, and abilities that cover the breadth of all that the Arkham franchise accomplished and then some are all but dashed at this point. Despite starring a Suicide Squad made up of Harley Quinn, King Shark, Captain Boomerang, and Deadshot taking aim at a corrupt Justice League, the gameplay so far appears Fortnite-esque with alien things, gear scores, and guns for every character at the forefront. Yes, even Captain Boomerang, which even if you knew nothing about him, you would assume probably preferences a boomerang. Well, not in this game. It's too early to be sure that this one is a bust, but players en masse are worried, and some formerly excited fans have already tapped out expecting the worst. That's the end of our script, but let me know down in that comment section when your moment was where you simply had to tap out of a video game. As always, I've been Jess from WhatCulture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonald, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more gaming goodness.